the Jesus way.
Oh, the Jesus way
Is the way of peace.
is the way of peace.
Oh, the Jesus way.
Oh, the Jesus way
Is the way of peace.
is the way of peace.
Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. When he is king, all wars will cease. May his peace begin with me. I'm gonna beat my sword
Gonna beat my sword
into a plow.
into a plow.
Gonna beat my sword
Gonna beat my sword
into a plow.
into a plow.
Gonna beat my sword into a plow. Christ is king in my life now. May his peace begin.
As a second grader, Jerry O'Donnell was the only student in his class who was politically engaged. He wore a political campaign button during the 1992 presidential election. For Jerry O'Donnell, the press secretary for Representative Grace Napolitano of California's 38th Congressional District of the House of Representatives, that served as an indication at an early age of his interest in government. And there were other indicators. Hello, I'm Brent Carlson. Welcome to Brethren Voices. Jerry also remembers going to the election polls with his parents. And he remembers the first time he was able to vote in the Pennsylvania gubernatorial election. Jerry is deeply rooted in the Church of the Brethren and has many connections with the church. He grew up just outside of Philadelphia and has been active in various Church of the Brethren congregations, including Royersford and the Green Tree Church of the Brethren. Jerry is presently active in the Washington City Church of the Brethren, where he serves on the church board. In this edition of Brethren Voices, Jerry shares important ways to communicate with your congressional legislators.
When I was legislative correspondent, I got all the letters. I got all the mail, so I was the person reading them. Also, interns help draft letters, so they read them as well. And
that could be a lot of letters.
it is a lot of letters. Now, many of them are the same, because a lot of them are form letters, so when there are action alerts from the Brethren office here, the Washington office, they come through as a form letter, unless you make changes to it and personalize it. And so some of them you can just reply to with one letter. Individual letters require a little bit more work because you don't have a form letter ready to go to reply. But I can also say honestly that my boss gets letters as well, the Congresswoman. Her chief of staff, the top-ranking staff person in the office, who oversees all the functions of our office, he also reads the letters, and occasionally he gives them to the Congresswoman. So my boss has responded to letters before. She's responded to constituent calls before. She's even called constituents back that have called asking her to support certain issues.
Jerry, in that vein, if somebody, because I assume like if the Sierra Club gets really excited about something, there's a form letter goes out and they ask everybody in the Sierra Club to send it to their congressperson. But how does somebody, they really want an impact, or they really want to get a congressperson's attention, is there certain things they should do in their letter, or is there a certain way to send it that could say, this is something really special to me and I really like to know that you can do something about it?
Yeah, speaking on behalf of my boss, I would say the more personal you make it, you can send a form letter, that's fine, but the more personal you make it, the more direct impact it's going to have. If you can relay your concerns, your individual concerns, your community concerns to your elected official, I think it carries more weight than something that has an organization attached to it. So I would recommend sending out the action alerts from the Brethren Witness Office and National Council of Churches, and doing things with Sierra Club and New Community Project and whatever, do those organized form letters, but also send a personal note. You can either send an email or a handwritten note and mail it, or a phone call leaving your feelings. Because one of the things I did as a legislative correspondent, and one of the things I still do now as press secretary, dealing with social media and responding to Facebook posts and tweets and all that.
All that? You have
and
to do all
YouTube
that?
comments, yes. I see it, and those are harder to respond to, but they're also more meaningful to my boss, to the Congresswoman. So one of the things I did as legislative correspondent was log all those comments and then print out the log for my boss so that she could take it with her and read what people were saying about what she's doing and what's happening in Congress and what bills she should support and oppose. And I think that means a lot more, and I think that has a little more weight than just a blanket form letter. So.
You mentioned that one of the key issues that she's dealing with is immigration, and that you pay attention to.
Yeah.
So when those letters come in, do you kind of add up like the pros and the cons and the different positions that people are taking and the recommendations they have, and then give a summary to your boss?
I don't total, and add up all the concerns that come in regarding immigration reform. They're given to me by the person who does that now, the current legislative correspondent. But
somebody does.
Yes, somebody does that now. But I will talk to my boss about people's concerns and let her know. So yeah, I do that after someone kind of puts that in a summary form, but also through meetings, whether there are constituents that come in and want to meet and talk about immigration issues, or whether lobbyists come in and want to talk about them, or immigration rights organizations come in and occasionally meet with my boss and me. I staff her in those meetings. So yes, she is informed of how people feel about those issues. But immigration reform has to happen this year. That's one that you're absolutely right. It's a very important issue to my boss. She's been working on it her entire time in Congress. She's been working on it since she was an assemblywoman in California, and pretty much been calling for it for generations. So this is the opportunity. The immigration bill in the Senate just passed out of the Judiciary Committee, and Senator Mitch McConnell, praise the Lord, has said he's not going to block it when it comes to the floor for a vote. So it looks like the Senate is going to vote on it soon, possibly as early as the week after next. So we're hopeful that it's going to happen this year, and it needs to happen. We need to fix the problem, and we need to ensure an earned path to citizenship for millions of people living in this country now.
There's a special interest, and I was listening to you, I have a friend who was losing his house because of all this refinancing thing, and the bank was not giving him, even though he qualified, they were not giving him the opportunity to refinance at a lower interest rate. And he wrote his congressperson, and they intervened. So that's a little different than these other issues. It's a very personal issue. How does one get the attention of your congressperson to say, I need some help, and I hope you'll help me?
Well, first thing is you've got to know who your representative is.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even know who their member of Congress is, who their elected official is in Washington. And secondly, you've got to know where their district office is, where the office is in their state, because those services are available in any congressional office. We don't do it here in Washington. We don't handle casework here in Washington because we handle legislative work. But our district office is phenomenal. Our staff handles, tons of casework, whether it's, help with housing, or whether it's veterans claims, or it could be, Social Security issues. So immigration's another one that people have contacted us. But it also takes the willingness of the person to trust that their representative can help them out and to seek those services.
So people really could write their congressman or call their district office and say, I really need some help here. Could you intervene on my behalf?
Yes. Now,
And something might happen.
something might happen. There are obviously many requests that go unfulfilled, but sometimes people ask for things that members of Congress can't deliver. But yes, whether it requires the intervention of the congresswoman writing a letter to someone, or whether it just requires some caseworkers to get in touch with people and work on their behalf, a lot of good is done. That's the shame, that people don't see the good that the government can do. They focus so much on the bad.
Thank you, Jerry. You're kind of our man in Washington. Recently, you were the host for the Christian Leadership, Christian Citizenship Seminar.
Yes, CCS. Let's call it that.
CCS. Okay, it's easier to remember. So how does that work? And you got very good reviews from that group who came to visit. So can you tell us about what it was and who benefited and how it works?
Sure. Well, this year the focus was on childhood poverty, and youth from across the country and the Church of the Brethren senior high youth annually get to come to New York, and they go to New York City and visit the United Nations, and they also come to Washington, D.C., and they get to participate in an advocacy day, a lobby day, on behalf of whatever issue they're focusing on that year. So this year, in April, senior high youth came to D.C. after being in New York City, and they were touring the sites, but they also were preparing to lobby their members of Congress and make their congressional visits. And so, as someone who knows a little something about congressional visits and congressional offices, I was asked to come lead a little tutorial on how to speak to legislative staff and how to make a successful congressional visit. And so I went and I spoke with them, met them in the evening after working all day here. We were in session that week. Or excuse me, we were not in session that week because it was a shame that they weren't able to visit their members, but they did all meet with legislative staff. But I went and I spoke to them about what it's like, and we did a little role playing on what to experience, and I answered questions that they had about different issues, and we talked about approaches that they should use. Some of the things I talked about earlier when contacting your representative. Make it personal. Put a face to an issue. Don't just talk about statistics somewhere else. Talk about how it impacts your community directly, and talk about how it affects you as a person of faith, as a brethren here in D.C. What does this mean to you? And so, I don't know about good reviews I got, but they seemed to get something out of it, and then I even got to meet with a couple of the youth the next day because I was because there were some from Laverne that came to visit. So I got to meet with some of my boss's constituents that I had talked to the night before, and test them and see how well they listened to me the night before. But that it was a great experience. I'm happy that I was able to give back some of the knowledge that I've picked up here, and just help these youth get engaged and help them express their convictions to their members of Congress.
I'm very happy to hear this because older people tend to get a little cynical or a little apathetic. But you're saying these 50 kids were really enthusiastic and feel like they can make a difference and want to be involved.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for them to come and learn about childhood poverty, being, children by some definition,
and most
as well.
of whom are not impoverished. So these
Correct.
Are, to get to come here, you to be a little.
I don't know what all of their socioeconomic status was and how well off their parents were, but regardless, these youth were interested in figuring out how they can advocate on behalf of children living in poverty in the U.S. not abroad.
Yeah.
Not with our Dominican brethren or our Nigerian brethren here in the U.S. This is happening in our country, and many people don't care. So.
And the children don't have a voice. That's, I think, the other tragedy. So
Exactly.
somebody has to speak up for them.
Exactly. And I've got to piggyback on that because that's something that my boss always says and always keeps in mind as a member of Congress. People don't think about children when they're crafting legislation, when they're voting on the floor, because children don't vote.
Yeah.
So that's something that my boss always recognizes and always tells people. That's why she does focus on children, and she does think about our future and isn't willing to sacrifice their future on today's altar in this budget crisis we're in.
Jerry, let's take a break for a short moment and listen to some information about Brethren Volunteer Services. Jerry, there's so much money, and there's so many lobbyists, and there's so much pressure on Congress and the Senate. And can an individual make a difference? Does it matter in what one person does?
I think so. I do. You're right. There's a lot of money in lobbyists. There are corporations that can spend, freely now with Citizens United. They're able to contribute without limitations. So that you're up against, a powerful force there. But I think going back to what we talked about, when you connect a personal story, you make it come alive. You make your request, not seem like there's money backing it. It's not associated with kind of the greed for something else. I think that has the power and that has the potential to touch, your elected official. I know it does for my boss, and if it doesn't impact yours and it doesn't affect yours, then there's another election, and you can make your voice heard and get him or her out. But they're there. Our representatives are there to represent us, and anytime you feel that you're not being represented and you're not, feeling like you've been listened to, I think you need to forget about the millions of dollars that other people are spending, because lobbyists aren't gonna.
They can't make that personal appeal.
But they're also not going to stay quiet. Lobbyists are constantly working. That's their job. And when they've got corporations backing them, they don't care that you're not making your voice heard. They will make theirs heard. So you can't let them drown out your voice. You need to speak up, and you need to speak with conviction.
What are your concerns about because you've now been here about 3 years?
Mm-hmm.
What are your concerns about the way things are going and how government is processing? And the reason I say that is that there's recently been in the news all kinds of demands from Guantanamo and the IRS.
Sure.
And we just had a bridge on I-5 collapse in Washington State.
Yeah.
So from wildlife to infrastructure to transportation to immigration to the war to terrorism, all these things are kind of all coming around, buzzing around, swirling around this seat of government.
Economy would be the number one issue that concerns me. The war in Afghanistan and basically war in general in this country right now concerns me. Not just growing up Brethren, but also being here, seeing it through the eyes of Congress. There's no end in sight. We've built our economy around the military. We are continuing to, build all these weapons that we're never going to use. We're finally deciding we can do without certain fighters, certain bombers, but we've got a nuclear arsenal that dwarfs, the rest of nuclear weapons in the world that other countries have, and that all the other countries have, and now we're continuing to flex our military muscle, trying to be, that kind of leader in the world, which you and I know is not the leader that we should be. But military spending, the priorities of military strength through just obsessive amounts of weapons and, looking at the world as ours to control. I think we have military bases in 190 countries or something like that, many of whom are our closest allies. We've still got bases operating. Now, I don't know what the solution is, because closing all these bases and bringing people home, that impacts our economy and it impacts our living here and what will people do. So we're kind of stuck there, but we can't keep sustaining that. We need to completely get out of Afghanistan and Iraq, and that doesn't mean go into Syria and using the force of the military. That doesn't mean going into Iran and shifting there. I think we need to really rebuild our own country and take care of those that live here, and we need to stop starting wars and
being the policeman of the world.
And being policemen and making more enemies. So that's another one. Thirdly, I'd say education. We already talked about immigration, so that's obviously high on my mind as very important. But I think education, along with this distrust of government, is coming this distrust of any public institution. And I've always grown up, thinking that education was a right, that public schools were important and should be available and should be good and put in a place to help students succeed. And I'm not just saying that because both of my parents were public school teachers. I'm also seeing that now, working on education issues and looking at our complicated system we're in, where teachers are not teaching to teach anymore. They're teaching for tests, and they're teaching for standards, and they're teaching basically to keep their jobs because they're put under the gun so that schools will receive funding. This is not a smart system, and it's hurting us, and it's hurting our future. And I'm fortunate that I had good education. I had good public school education, K through 12, and then I got to go to Juniata and have a good, privately funded education. But that really concerns me as well, because it ties in with the economy.
What would you suggest people who are visiting come and see in Washington, if they're Church of the Brethren or not? Because it's a fascinating place. But what do you think the highlights are that are places not to be missed?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind has got to be the FDR Memorial, which is not that old. I'm trying to remember when it was built and when it was established, but it is breathtaking. FDR was an incredible president, unprecedented, and will never be matched, having served 4 terms, even though he didn't finish his 4th term. But to look at all that he went through as a president and to walk along this pristine path that kind of portrays each term and shows his family is incredible. It's just beautifully done. It's not this grandiose memorial like the Washington Monument or like the Lincoln Memorial or Jefferson Memorial. It's very peaceful, and it's just such a really great place to visit. That's over there near the Jefferson Memorial, near the tidal basin, so I definitely would recommend that. Also, while you're there, go to the new Martin Luther King Memorial that was built just about 2 years ago now. It was finished. It's very simple. It shows Dr. King with his arms crossed, just kind of looking straight ahead. But it's beautiful, and all of his quotes are carved around the site, and so like along the wall nearby. So it's amazing. So those 2 off the bat. Third, I should say come visit me, come to Congress. But
Can people come and see
absolutely.
you, even if they're not from Southern California?
Absolutely, they can. Yeah, I
They
can
just
always
call you up, or?
I can always deny them and say they're not from Cal. No, they can definitely come see me.
Okay.
Third, I'm going to say the Library of Congress, specifically the Jefferson Building. This is the one right across from the Capitol Building, right next to the Supreme Court. It is one of the most beautiful buildings in D.C., probably in the world. The reading room is fantastic, and as a staff of a member of Congress, I'm able to go in there and read, which I don't do enough, but it's breathtaking. Everyone should visit there as well. So,
Thank you for being with us on Brother and Voices.
thank you, Brent.
For Brother and Voices, this is Brent Carlson.
And Jerry O'Donnell,
Wishing you
peace.
May his peace begin with me. Oh, the Jesus way
Oh, the Jesus way
is the way of peace.
is the way of peace.
Oh, the Jesus way
Oh, the Jesus way
is the way of peace.
is the way of peace.
Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. When he is king, all wars will cease. May his peace begin